cheap and cheerful, because I'm not in a position to, you know, having put 3 kids through university to go and buy lots of glass. So I collect sea glass, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
And I collect nesting dolls, and I collect vintage bulbs. I collect rocks, feathers, and rocks, feathers, shells, minerals, and fossils, friends, plants.
So I probably have some things that you might like.
Perfect.
Because I used to be a geologist.
Oh, don't tell me that. Okay. I'm thrilled to come and speak to Glasfax about vintage bulbs. And it all started when everybody's family has a different tradition. One of my traditions was Mom, me, Santa Claus, and usually their grandpa, up to my 3 children, every year got a glass bulb. Not antique, but just a pretty glass bulb. And that was great. And my tree looked fantastic until they grew up and had their own homes and apartments.
And took their own glass.
And, that's like, okay, 3, one's almost 30. That's like 150, 160 bulbs off my tree. I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? So I started thinking about asking my mom what she had in the basement of her old things. And it started this way
Which
first.
one did it start with?
So there's a nice orange and silver bulb there. And I thought, it had no cap on it. I wasn't going to hang it on the tree. And then I started collecting a few little things. And then I made that shadow box. So I put it up, but that was just the beginning of my little collection, right? So I've been collecting for 5 years, the bulbs, and all glass vintage. And now I have multiple trees in my house. This tree here will probably just stay at Mom's because my daughter's having her fiance come and we're going to have an open house and I have a tiny home, so one tree will be eliminated from the spot. But I'm super excited to have Scott and Terry come too. Sorry, Maurice. Because for the first time in my parents' home at least, someone's come in and oohed and awed on my collection. They walked right to the tree and they're like, ooh, and then they were looking at that. They're looking at mine. I'm like, this is a bonus having them come. So I hope I can teach you something, and let's keep in touch, and we'll figure out great ways to share information. Okay? So today I'm going to help them identify their bulbs. And a vintage ornament, Christmas ornament, glass ornament, is from 1920 until 1970. Below 1920, you have an antique ornament. So I only have a couple antique ornaments, and most collectors are looking for 50s, 60s right now. And they look gorgeous, and you may have some 50s, 60s, you may have some early stuff too. So where did a Christmas tree come from? Of course, the early Egyptians and Romans and pagans, all in the winter solstice, brought in evergreen boughs because they smelled good and they didn't die, and they brightened up your environment, and they were good for illnesses and your health. So that's the beginning of the Christmas tree, more like evergreen boughs coming in. And then it was in Germany, and it was actually the Protestant Reformation that started eyeballing the beauty of a tree in your home, and the candle, which was representing God and Jesus and the first night, etc. So that's where that came from. So we can thank Christmas really to the Germans at the moment because they loved having their Christmas tree. Now, many countries in Europe had lots and lots of glass blowers. And, Italy had lots of glass blowers, Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia. And there was a group of glass blowers that were on the border here in Germany. And they were Huguenots, which are Protestants, and they were persecuted. So they decided to move. And just this little tiny dot here on this map, I want you to have a glance at it. I'm going to put it on here. Is where's the capital of glass? Christmas ornaments came from. And it all happened because one of the founders that was like 1597, they were making glass eyeballs and they were making vessels, etc. And there were lots of tariffs going on, and you couldn't decorate your tree because you couldn't afford nuts and berries and fruit. So the glass blowers, one particular glass blower decided, I'll just make a berry out of glass, right? And that's how the tradition of glass ornaments came. It was a true cottage industry, like true cottage industry. Almost everybody in that town was a glass blower making ornaments. So it started with the father or the older men in the family who started the blowing, and then the mother and the children started pouring the silver nitrate into it to make it reflect, and then they were hanging it in their cottage on nails, and then in the morning they were painting them. So it was a really big cottage industry. And I've got a couple really amazing pictures of actually seeing the family putting together the bulbs. Now, when the German, Irish, Scottish, English people started to immigrate to North America, they brought their traditions with them. And quite often they brought, you know, beautiful bulbs they had, and they started introducing the Christmas tree in North America. And it's glass. It's not always going to last. It's not always going to get there. But they were real treasures. And the royalty at the time, like our celebrities and Instagram, was Queen Victoria and her German husband, Prince Albert. And in, let's see the date, I just want to make, it's 1846. There was a great magazine, and they showed Queen Victoria and her husband and children with their Christmas tree. It's on the front and the back, and the ornaments were from Germany. Well, again, she was a real celebrity. People went crazy, and then everybody wanted Christmas ornaments. And that's when the industry really caught on fire, and ornaments were coming to North America. They were going all over Europe, and the German production was pretty strong until 1925. And then other countries were like, okay, well, let's make some ornaments. Japan became a big industry in making ornaments because the Japanese family was very suited to the cottage industry also. In the home, everybody doing a part, everybody producing 100 bulbs or baubles or fancies a day, and they started capturing on that market. So you'll see that the picture on the back and front is Victoria with her family with their beautiful ornaments. So what happens is the cottage industry can't really keep up, and there's a population growth and an industrial revolution happening, and people want bulbs, and they have to be shipped to Canada and North America, and it's like, what's North America going to do? We can't get all these bulbs. They can't make enough bulbs. So really smart individuals in North America and the United States started thinking about, well, how can we produce bulbs? And how can we get a market on that? And F.W. Woolworth, everybody's heard that name, was one of the first who thought, okay, we can only import so many, right? We don't have enough. And there were a couple other German immigrants who were distributors, and they decided to go to Corning factory, approach them. Now, everybody in the room here knows what Corning is, right? Because they collect glass, but it was a big industry for glass. And they had one factory that made light bulbs. So Woolworth and the distributors went to Corning and said, would you consider taking your machine, converting it, and producing balls, just glass balls for the market. And Woolworths made a commitment. It was a huge commitment. It was something like, we will buy, I think, 300,000 bulbs that year and distribute in our 5 and dime stores. And Corning said yes. And that was the start of the American market. Now those Woolworths and the distributors of Christmas ornaments were very clever because they also recognized that war was coming. And there would be tariffs, just like World War I, where you couldn't bring German things into North America. And also, to have a nice bulb, you need tin, you need aluminum, you need silver nitrate, all the things that you need for a war effort. So they were really smart, got Corning on the ball, they started producing, and that market took off. And most balls that you see on a tree are from the American market. Let's just pick one out real quick, like that. And North Americans could have their own trees covered with glass balls. So one other company that produced balls was Premier Glassworks. And they were a little bit of a competition for the Corning balls. The balls went out, distributed around the country, and people started their own designs, but it was all the same balls. And Premium only lasted 5 or 6 years, and they recognized they couldn't keep up. So that's kind of the history of where our glass balls that we see, they'll be from Germany, they'll be from Czechoslovakia, they'll be from Japan, or they'll be from the United States. And these are all glass balls. So now we're going to identify them, okay? This is the fun part. I personally think a collection, there's the hunt, right? You're looking for it, you got a wish list, you may find it, you might not find it, you might be able to afford it, you might miss it. So that's really fun part. And then the second part is the identification. And some people are superb at it. This Dave over here, this Dave here, this Carl. They like to do the digging, finding the catalogs, finding the information. And then the third part is the display. And the display is just as fun. How are you going to display it? How are you going to show off your collection? How are you going to use it on a daily basis? I grew up in a family that we used Mom and Dad's collection. We used the goblets. We used the sherry glasses. We used it because why not? You can leave it in a cabinet, but why not use it? So I put my balls up. I put all my glass ornaments up and just hope for the best, right? Just hope that it doesn't get knocked over, and if it does, it doesn't, but I enjoy it. So the hunt, when I'm collecting, of course, the first tool of identification is your Google. Everybody knows that, right? Your Google Lens. Does everybody use Google Lens? Ginny, you're looking like you don't use Google Lens. You guys use Google Lens, right? Okay, so that's like your first, right? You think that you see something. Now, you all have to recognize that on Google Lens, somebody's selling something, they say, oh, this is German, and it might not be, it might be Polish, or this is North American, but it might have been made in Japan for North America. So after you do your Google Lens and you've got a couple ideas of what the bulb is, then you're going to go to caps. All right, so your caps are your first thing. There's a wide variety of caps, and the cap is going to give you all the information you need to identify your beautiful decorations. So you'll see that there's a little spring load here on how it goes in, and actually the earlier spring load caps will have a slight tinge of brown to them, so you know it's older. So you can see this is it's very tiny, and I'm going to send that around, but just note that this is more silver, and this has you can see it's just the rusting is happening. So there's your first clue on the color. Okay, and then every country, almost every section have different caps. So all caps were crowned with a spring load by 1843. So you know that if you have something that has maybe a piece of cotton or twine or pipe cleaner, it may be even earlier than 1843. It would be nice to find that. I haven't found one, but you know that the spring load is 1843. So we look at the neck of this ornament. It's very, see how it's very thin? It's not a big thick neck. And the cap has 4 squinchies on it. I call them squinchies. They're the holes into it. See how there's 4? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh,
You're going to count.
flanges that fold
Yes.
down, yeah.
So you're going to count always how many, and you're going to see the color of the tops of the cap. And look at this one. I'll pass that around. You can just pass those along. You have a German, and this is I think that is Japanese. Yes. Okay, that cap's made in Japan. And then you have, when you get into Corning bulbs, the bulbs are very, very silver. Okay, because this is 1939 they started. And we have some markings. We start to have markings where it will say made in the USA or made of the USA. And that will help identify how old your bulb is. And then you're going to have a little tiny squishy one that looks like a bottle cap. And Japanese ornaments had bottle cap tops. And then plastic starts to come in. And even though this is from the 70s, which is still considered vintage, you're going to have plastic tops. So every cap is going to help you unless, okay, we'll pass that over here, unless somebody along the line has swap them out. And why would you swap them out? Because one could fall, but you keep the cap. So I had found this one. They're exactly the same. And this was when I was first collecting. I'm like, oh, well, that's odd. Like, that doesn't really fit, right?
Right.
Doesn't fit. But there's a perfect example of it. Somebody has used a cap. And then luckily later on, I found one very similar. And I can look at the cap. And it's got the spring load. It's got the wire tension. It has no crevices. So I know that's before World War II. And then we've got fancy caps. And you go, okay, that's nice. Do I think that's old? Okay, it's marked on there on the top, GDR. So what's GDR stand for?
Democratic Republic.
Say it a little louder, Dave.
Is that what you got?
Yeah.
German Democratic Republic.
Right, so we know that's what?
Germany.
What age do you think that is?
46 onwards.
Exactly, to 1968.
Oh.
So we definitely know that that's a nice vintage bulb, even though the top is very silver, okay? And it's not dark like a very old bulb, but we know that because of the marking. So the wall happened, and Germany, there were no east and west, etc. And when we go back to our map, when we looked at our map where that great town is, well, not only were they persecuted as Huguenots, then you'll see they were on the map after the war. So a lot of glass blowers had to make a decision. Did they run to east or west? And then lots of the caps changed after that because of it. So here's some good caps. And when you're looking, you'll be able to see how different the caps are. And you'll see the little spring load hangers. And that will give you an indication of where they're from also. Now, the war happened and we had to change materials.
Never thought about looking at the caps.
There we go. Everybody's looking at the caps. Good for you. Where is just looking for one thing.
I think I did.
So during the war, oh, I know. Here, Dave has it here. I'm going to show this one. Oh, you keep it, Dave. During the war, of course, tin was scarce. So the glass makers, this is a Corning ball, had to come up with another way for hangers. So this is a cardboard hanger. And we know this is from 1939 to 1944. So we know that's how old it is because this is made out of cardboard. And you'll see, they're really hard to find. Have you ever seen one?
No.
Well, there you go. I've seen them, but they're very expensive, so I lucked out on finding that one. All right.
Survived.
It survived. And you know why they didn't survive? Because, of course, cardboard's going to
You get it
eventually
all.
disintegrate and fall.
Yeah.
But that's what they used, is the cardboard for those years, because
Huh.
the
So we
tin...
don't have any on the tree that might fall today?
No, Mom. Actually, I only have that one that I just showed you. I've tried to find them. They're hard to find. They're super expensive. And the only reason that I was able to find that is on Marketplace. I zoomed in, and the lady did not know what she had. And I bought it, but I also told her that I gave her extra money for it because she had, you know, a couple just minor bulbs, and then she had that, and it's like, oh, okay. So they're hard to find. Now, some collectors only collect war bulbs because they're not silvered. You'll see how clear it is.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not silvered because the silver nitrate had to be used for the war effort, and there were tariffs on a lot of things too from Europe. Some people just collect the clear ones. So it's a Corning bulb, and then the bulb is sent, and then they're using a ribbing machine to do the painting of the stripes. So very, very American. Here, let's put that. Where did that one go? Oh, and it's gone that you right.
Terry's got it.
Terry's got it. Okay, so caps. One of the things about caps, especially for Scott, is your posts. Okay, so 4 posts at the top of your cap is German, and 6 posts at the top of your cap is Polish. Okay, so really clearly look at your caps, and that will help you with your age and where they come from. So caps is your first thing that you look at. Now, when I collect, I started this, I identify, and then if I can, I write down whose bulbs they were. And just like a little tribute. Because I have bought glass ornaments from people, and they'll say to me, oh, it was my grandmother's and my great grannies, and you know, oh, I feel bad, and I'm like, well, why are you telling them? And in fact, this one person, I bought 2 boxes of bulbs, and I went all the way up to Beaton from Whitby, and I got a message back on Marketplace, and she was distraught that she had sold her grandmother's bulbs. Like distraught. I drove all the way back and gave them back to her, and but I asked if I could keep one. So I write everybody's name if I know. If I buy something through Marketplace, of course at an antique store you can't, but if I write the person's name, whose bulbs they were, so I have all the grandmothers and that there on my tree. So the places that I look for vintage bulbs are Marketplace, number 1. You can find some good things, and sometimes people don't know what they have, and sometimes people do. Antique stores, of course. Auctions. Carl sent me to an auction. My mom and I went to an auction a couple
Was
weeks
it
ago.
fun?
Yeah, it was super fun. And
How many items were in that auction?
oh, thousands.
Really?
Yeah, thousands. Thousands and thousands. It was fun.
Was it all Christmas ornaments?
No, The main focus was Christmas. They had Googled them later. I believe they had a Christmas tree farm at one time, so they started collecting. They had lots and lots of vintage Christmas stuff, like tons and tons and tons of boxes and boxes. But the prices were very high.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there were a lot of dealers there, like buying multiple lots of things, but it was very cool. Marketplace is a fun place to get them. I don't know if you're on Marketplace, antique stores, etc. But when you're collecting, antique dealers don't normally put their Christmas stuff out until Christmas time. And then at Christmas time, you can't really afford to indulge in your habit because you got to buy gifts for people, right? So it's hard to watch for Christmas ornaments.
Yeah.
Most dealers will sell by the bulb. Have you found that?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can buy, look in a bowl of them and choose them. Okay, so caps. So that caps is the first thing. Then the next thing is material. And material is going to tell you a major amount about your ornaments. So here we have one that has paper, paint, it's silvered. We've already looked at the cap. We know this is from the 40s. It also has something called sugaring on it. And those cottage industry German glass blowers use sugar actually to make their sparkles on them. So that cottage industry, you were sharing molds throughout your town, and all the bulbs were relatively uniform sizes, but you wanted to make yours more appealing. So when WF Woolworths sends his people into your town, they'll say, well, okay, we're gonna have 5 cases of yours, etc. So they started using sugar and paper to change the look of their bulbs. So we know that's from the 40s. Then here we have a nice clear glass one. Anybody guess what kind of period that is?
From the war.
That's right, from the war. We know that they didn't use silver nitrate. We've looked at the cap. We can tell this is hand painted. And then here is some material where it's all hand painted and you can feel the raisedness from it. You've looked at the cap. You've seen how many posts there are. So we know this might be, where do you think?
Czech? No, Polish.
You got it. Oh, they're good students over here, right? And then here we've got, it looks like a very, very nice silvering. See how there's no marks on it? So we know this is a little bit later. It's probably the same mold that was used 20 years before it started to tarnish. It's marked. It's a little bit shinier. It's got a nipple on the bottom, so we know it's mouth blown. But we know it's probably from the 50s or 60s, just because of the look of the shine of the silver nitrate. So materials are your next, where you're going to look and see their age. Here's a couple more materials. Something that they used instead of sugar, because sugar was expensive, is mica. And mica is a rock that can be ground and painted, and this is, okay, and there's some mica, and there's some mica, and some more mica, and then all of a sudden we see a stencil where it's a plain bulb but it's stenciled on. We've looked at the top, it says made in the USA. The shape stenciling came into the 50s. So if you see a stencil, which is exactly like you would do on your glass, the stencil, and we had the spray, we made all those things. Stenciling is from after the war. Okay, we'll pass that way and look at those materials. Okay, so the next thing that we can tell for age is shapes. Okay, so when the German industry started making the bubbles for their trees, they wanted to make things that would be the same as fresh things. Pine cones, berries, birds, etc. So we're gonna, when we go to look at vintage, we're gonna look for those shapes. Always look for those shapes, not just plain. So every shape is gonna tell a little story. So when you start to see pine cones, and you've read the cap, and you've looked at the material, and you've got a nice pine cone, you can pretty well tell this is copying German because it's an American cap, but the German glass blowers made a lot of pine cones. So there, that's an American bulb. And then we've got the lantern. A lot of people have probably seen the lantern, right? That's a very famous, shiny, bright. You know how Corning was doing that, the biggest company was Shiny Bright. And they used a lot of lantern styles. And then this is a teardrop. And when you look at these shapes, you're gonna look on the bottom and see if you find a little point off, which is the end of the glass blowing, or is there nothing and it's been made in a mold. The Corning bulbs were made in a mold, the glass was blown. And okay, now we're looking at this shape. Oh, it's a nice shape, reflector shape, but it's got the point. So all those shapes will kind of be indications on how old they are. And lots and lots of pine cones and acorns will give you an idea. You can look at the cap. 1940s. This one will, I've got quite a few of the ages on here. You can look at the cap and the shape, and lots of German ornaments. Now we'll get into the reflectors. So reflectors were made to, of course, reflect the light. And first Christmas trees had candles on their trees. And then of course, you only brought the tree in on Christmas Eve and put your candles on it because it was a real fire. And then the blowers started thinking, how can we reflect more light? So that's a reflector. You're going to look at the cap, that's shape, the material, the point on the bottom. You can tell that it's hand blown. Sorry, mouth blown. We had that corrected before, didn't we? That's good. And again, lots and lots of different grading on it, ribs on it, to make the light shine. There's some other shapes. Okay, so musical instruments was big in the 20s, 30s, and 40s in Europe. So if you find a musical instrument and you've looked at the cap and it's got 6 prongs and the cap looks, you know, it's got the brown tinge to it, you're going to look and see if it's got any kind of nipple on it. Definitely from the 1930s. And then a bell, when you go to look at bells, if it has a tiny clapper in it, it's European. Okay, so always remember that. All bells with a little clapper, it's a little tiny stone, that's a European bell. All American bells are just the form of the bell. So here, the comparison, you can go, okay, we've got the cap. We know that's the American cap, American shape. We've got a European cap. We can count how many. We've got the real clapper at the bottom, which is the real rock they would put in. So we know American, European. And then we've got another kind of cap. It's, you'll see it's squared off. You see how it's squared off? That's Russian. Okay, and you occasionally will find that cap, and it's got a really tiny wire, and this kind of is, you know, the snow, the mica on it and then the Russian looking houses. So houses were really popular too, and little churches. Musical instruments, houses, little churches. Here's a personal favorite of mine. It's a little tiny mushroom. The cap is has 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's got 4. It's very old. It's probably from the 30s. And again, we've got some more Russian little houses. And here's a little Santa Claus. Again, looking at the cap. Lanterns were very American. When you see bulbs that have a lantern shape, it's an American bulb.
Interesting the weight of
Some of them are so light. So super light. Now, so most collectors want to collect the Corning bulbs for sure, and there are major collectors of shiny brights Corning bulbs, and those are the ones that you're usually going to find more so than any of the if you happen upon European ones, that's fantastic. But the shiny brights you're going to find, and probably everybody's grandma or grandpa or great uncle had some form of American Corning bulb. And they talk about, of course, American collectors think Corning bulbs are the end and be all of everything, right? They are beautiful. They're consistent, uniform, and they really felt that Corning saved Christmas for all North America in the 1939. So Corning produced these shapes, and luckily, like your catalogs for collecting pressed glass, it's easy to find catalogs online, and you can compare what you think might be a Corning bulb to the catalog. And these are the basic shapes. It gives you the how many inches and the shape. So find this online and use that as a comparison when you find something. Okay, so those are the Corning bulbs. The Corning bulbs, they had to send them out to get painted, and then we had different industries, and then their caps were different, but the bulb was similar. Okay, and here's a great article that where the factory was is the capital of Christmas ornaments in the United States. And on the back page, you'll see the ribbing machine that was converted from the light bulbs to the Christmas ornaments. And that is in, what's that famous, the Henry Ford collection. It's at that. Have you guys been to that museum before? Yeah. Donna has. Good for you, Donna. And then we've got advertising, and advertising is a great way to identify your bulbs too, because most people bought their bulbs at Woolworths, and Woolworths produced a catalog, and Sears produced a catalog, and Butler used a catalog. So you can take a bulb and you think you've got something, and you can look at their catalogs. So here's some nice pictures of Corning advertisements. Pass that to Dave. Who knew, eh?
Yeah.
So here we go. Here's 3 war bulbs. They're unsilvered. They're it's one colored. You can look at their caps. You can see the ribbing. You can see how the industry had to adapt. Again, they're, some people like that look. I personally like silvered balls, but they produced and sold just as many during the war as after the war. So those are your Americans. It was never interrupted during the war. They just found a way to do it. Okay, so there's your American ones, okay, coming up. And then, for collectors, the end all and be all is this box. Some people just collect the boxes without the ornaments in it. And they have the boxes under their tree. And that's how they collect. So this is a little box to find.
We have the boxes.
You have the
We have
boxes?
some boxes.
Well, there's your next collection.
Now, the cellophane on some of them is not as good as it could be,
No.
but we have the boxes for
Good
some.
for you.
Yeah.
So this shiny bright box is what every collector wants to find, because you've got down here Uncle Sam and Santa Claus shaking hands for the war effort and basically saying, okay, you don't have the fancy ones, you have the unsilvered, you have the plain glass ones, but even the Christmas industry's doing their best for the war effort. So everybody wants that box there. Did you ever happen upon it? So lots of times, again, you can go to the catalogs, and there's been things that I have found, and I'm like, oh my God, this is so old. I'm so excited about it. And then I go, oh yeah, just wait a minute. Oh yeah, look at that catalog, 1952. Okay, still old, but you assume, you can make assumptions that something is older. So these are ones that you can find online that you can use easily cross-reference. Here's one variant. And here's even a catalog in the 1925 Butler. You can cross-reference when you find things too. Now, after the war, Corning was still producing balls. There were lots of different companies, and you can check those companies by the cap. So we have Shiny Brights, they have their own cap that is crimped, and it says made in USA. You have Raunch, which is crimped, and it has Raunch right on it. There's Premium, and it has Premium on it too. And sometimes you have to use your magnifying glass because the wear and tear. So right after the war, stenciling became super popular. And again, it was a way of being able to decorate and still keep the shine of the ball, and a way to sell more, because every year a new stenciled bulb came out, right? That's how they hook collectors, right? Like Beanie Babies. So you have reference, you can find out exactly by your stenciled scene what year it came out. Okay, you can tell what year it came out. There's lots of reference online, and you can identify your ball. So here's 4 stenciled ones, and I've got this guy here. I know it's a 1949 design. It was shiny bright cap, and silver and white came out that year, so I can identify that. And here's another scene. I can look up in the catalog. Here's a Santa and reindeer. Let's see what year that is. Oh, that came out in 1950. And there's a little tiny miniature one. And so that's the 50s look, the stencils. Do you have any stencils?
No, I don't think so.
No. So Shiny Brights and Corning lasted until 1970. So it was a good long run of 20 plus years. And then, of course, in the 70s, we still have European bulbs coming. We have mass-produced bulbs coming from China. We have lots of copies. So when you're a collector, you just have to be careful that you're not duped and you think, oh, that's really exciting. Here's one of my little dupes. I'm like, oh, I think that's a Shiny Bright. Oh, I gotta get that. Gotta pick that up from that lady at Marketplace right away. It's plastic and it has a crimped top, but it's mass produced. When you scratch it, you can tell. But so you gotta be careful because people like vintage, and lots of companies are copying the exact same shapes as the vintage. So now here's a couple more American bulbs. Again, very different than the European ones. These are Corning bulbs, the exact same shapes as I showed you in that catalog. the bells, the reflectors, the teardrops, the pine cone, the round 4-inch, the round 5-inch, and the baubles. And probably the top one here, the gold one, is the earliest of the American ones here on that side. You can tell by the cap, it's got the crinkle, scalloped, made in USA, the shape. I've looked at the catalog and I can tell it's an American. So collecting it, you can identify very easily as long as nobody has changed the cap on you, and you can tell that it's the exact same size, same materials, and same spring on it. So it's easy to identify once you figure that out. Then the next way to identify how old something is styles. And every country had a different kind of style. So here's Polish styles, hand blown. You can tell by the point of, right? Mouth blown, excuse me. You can tell how many springs on it. Polish like to paint skiers, flowers, ribbons, and they like glitter. So in this tray, you'll have a good look at that, especially you two. You can tell them look by just looking in that tray. Again, skiers, ribbon. Yeah, poor Dave. So that's Polish, and here's another Polish container. You can tell by the cap. You've got the glitter. You've got ribbon. You've got stripes. Is it too many to look at?
No,
No, that's
I'm trying to remember.
Oh,
Can't
you
remember.
can't remember. That's all right. Now this little tray, and by the way, I did not drink all these coffees. I had my friends collect them, so I wasn't wasting time. Heather said to me, "Oh, I've never seen a little bulb like that's on your tree. It's so tiny." So Japan, remember I told you they were well suited for the cottage industry in the 1925s and on. They thought, okay, we can make this, but how are we going to capture the market? So they captured the market in miniatures and for feather trees. And Heather wasn't sure what a feather tree is. I'm sure some of you have heard about it, what a feather tree is. It is a tree that kind of looks like a Charlie Brown tree. It has a straight, usually brown, painted post. And the arms of the tree or the branches go straight out. So they start at the top, straight out, straight out, straight out, straight out. And that is so that you could hang your bulbs perfect. Because on this tree, you can't hang bulbs perfect, right? Because things get in the way. Like this goes wonky, but because it can't go down. So a feather tree, a German feather tree, was made out of feathers. They're super expensive. If you ever happen upon one and it's only a couple $100 and you want to put that in your collection, you should. Miniatures, and you add miniatures.
Mine are fake though, mine are not
Okay.
real.
So the Japanese small miniatures for the feather tree, bottle cap, thin wired spring, beautiful colors, but not hand painting, seams, very basics. Okay, so those are all.
bird clock.
Okay, so this is a cool container. Again, we've got the East and the West German caps, and right on there you'll see the caps are very different. They've got a little bit of scalloping. These are not old, but they're still considered vintage. They're still from the 50s and 60s. And you've got your East and West German bulbs, circus mostly the 1950s and a couple 60s. And it's got the GDR on it. Okay, so you know it's prior to the wall coming down. Because again, the glass blowers were divided. So there's a style that you can look, and a lot of glitter too. And then we've got Czechoslovakia. And Czechoslovakia loved glitter and they loved blowing reflectors. So most of your reflectors are going to be from Czechoslovakia. And here we go. Yeah, and most of these are from the 1940s and 50s in this one. From Czechoslovakia. You can see there's lots of glitter.
Here's some reading to you, just in case.
Oh, here's another Polish tray. Again, when you get to the Polish tray, mouth blowing, painted, flowers, striping, glitter, and skiers. They loved doing skiers. Sorry, Carl.
Okay.
How do you store this at home? Like, do you take them out of these little?
Yeah, I have boxes that I put them in. But I collected those when we went to the District 4's meeting because I thought that'd be a good way to pass them around.
Oh, I see.
Oh, and I forgot to say, if any of them break, nobody is to freak out, right? I forgot to say that at the beginning. Now, my personal favorite is indent reflectors. I think they're gorgeous. I think they're fun to collect. So when you look at your bulb, you're going to see the indent goes quite deeply in. And the early ones were made with a wood applique to punch in to your bulb. So here's a picture of it. So it's blown. Before it's hung, the wood is stamped in, it's carved in, then it's hung, so dipped in the silver nitrate, hung overnight, and then painted. Does that make sense? So there you can see there's an example of an antique one. I'll pass that around. And most of the ones in this tray, you'll see they're from Poland and Czechoslovakia. Most of them are probably from the 40s and 50s, and every reflector is a bit different. And there were all kinds of shapes for reflectors, diamond shapes.
Okay.
Some of them are deeper, and a lot of them are painted to add extra color too. How we doing with our trays? You guys, we're okay with our trays? Anybody have any questions about the trays so far?
This one's so
Pause over there.
Is everyone need to, oh, they're going too slow over there? You guys
They're
are
too slow over there.
Well, that's because Carrie is a keener, and she wants to make sure she knows that's good.
I have some things
good.
I need to.
I hope, did you bring some?
No,
No, okay.
I didn't think they were old enough.
Well, they are. Right?
Still going that way.
How are we doing? Anybody have any questions about those trays? We're not missing anything? So here's a real find that I was happy about. I was able to identify the cat. I was able to look at the materials and I see a bit of mica on there. It's a double reflector, which means both sides. It is mouth blown, and I was able to find it in a catalog, a 1930s catalog. So I know it's from Germany, and I've been able to completely identify it. So I've added all the dots. So when you add all the dots, it's nice to have. So reflectors can be doubles, they can be singles, and here's a little one. It's not very detailed, but it has 4 reflectors. Again, it's got the pointef at the bottom, the cap. This is Polish.
Ken, I wanna ask you a question
Yes, Mom.
about this one. Like, all these little lines, are they just scratched out or are they purposely made more so than?
Oh, Mom, look, it's painted on there. The glitter. You see that?
Got it.
It's like little ribbons.
Okay.
Yes, of course. Oh, there. Oh, she wants a picture mid talk. Okay, well, we're working on it.
Thank you.
Nice. Thanks, Dave, you're doing a great job. You are keeping them ordered.
Okay, now.
And here's some more, I'll send some more reflectors over here.
I've seen some, I can't remember what they say. Oh, you're fucking. This part, oh, right on the second. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking with a fella and he was describing the caps. And he was suggesting that the different impressions on the caps, like the ribbon or the cutting out of them,
Yes,
also define where they came from.
absolutely. So you see the scallop is American, and then you'll see the, where was it, the
Like
chocolate?
he had one that was like a chevron shape.
Yes, I don't recall that shape, but see, you're talking this part?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see in this particular tray, it's all TDR. So that's the pattern from them, from the 50s. Okay, now here's my rarest and my oldest pieces. I don't normally put them up on the tree. I just like, I might do some kind of shadow coffee table for Christmas of some sort to show them. And I could safely say that these ones in here,
I'm on hold.
I've been able to identify the cap, the shape, find it in a catalog, and identify it by the age there. So we've got a little tiny nut here. You can see it's not, there's no silver nitrate. It's just silvered on the one side, on the outside, not in the middle. And that I've done at 1920s to 30s. It is missing the cap, so you can see the glass at the top, but it still has the spring form in it. So I would never put that up. Here we have a Santa from the 1930s. I've been able to, a pink Santa. I've been able to identify it from the cap and a catalog that it's Japanese. And then here's a beautiful lantern. Mouth blowing, the cap, probably from the 1930s too. There's my old dice. And here's another container of fairly old ornaments. You can tell by the cap, I've got some pine cones from the 20s and 30s in there. We'll pass it this way. Want me to take that? Marion hasn't seen that.
The variant goes to this one.
And then here, you can tell the age also by the materials that you haven't seen yet. Late Victorian, we used pipe cleaners, crimped wire. The cap is always missing. I was very lucky to, it's still somewhat intact with some string somebody has put it on. And then here I've been able to find this one. It's from Czechoslovakia, the 1920s. It's got crimped wire. I've been able to find that in a catalog. And again, there's another one that I was able to find in the catalog. So those are all my old pieces. And then this one, Carl, this is my new one that I got at the auction. I know this is from the 1920s, maybe even the 1900s, because there's cotton inside the glass. I'm not really sure why they used cotton. Maybe it was an approach to like save the glass if it ever fell. And crimped wire and paper. Yeah. And then here's a little teapot, mouth blowing, the cap is gone, and hand painted. Here's another one that's pretty old, 1900s, crimped wire, and you can see there's no spring load on it. It's just not ribbon, but chenille. You know, the chenille is like a wool that is crinkled. And here's a beautiful little glass blowing one from Germany, probably the 1920s too. So those are the old ones. So, here's my dupes that I have collected over the 5 years. Not too bad, just 4 or 5 years. So I found, I think there's 8 on the tree. And I found this on Marketplace, and an antique dealer was selling it, and she's like, "Oh, she said Victorian, you know, tree candles." I'm like, "Oh my God, they're stunning, Victorian. They're only like $40. Like, I'm driving there right now, and you know, you respond back. I'll be there in a half an hour." Like, so excited. So, beautiful looking, like super nice looking, and they could easily, the look of them is very antique and old and vintage. And then as I moved along in being able to identify it, yes, they're a copy, and they're from the late 80s. Still vintage and still sweet, but that was my biggest dupe, where I thought I had hit the jackpot. I found something amazing. And then, of course, this one, again, I showed you that before. I'm like, "Oh, it's a shiny bright, look at that." And it's plastic, and it's, you know, made in China. And then this one, I'm like, "Oh, this has got to be a beautiful bauble from Germany. It's a nut. It's so cool." I've expanded the picture in Marketplace. It looks really great. You know, I drive like 40 minutes to go get it. It's only like $7. Oh, it's a light bulb from the 50s.
Oh, it's actually a light bulb.
But you know, you have to move along, right? And this one, you do have to, like, you can't just. And then this one, I thought was one of my dupes, and because the cap didn't look perfect, and I said, "I don't think it's glass, like, for sure." I didn't spend a lot of money on it. It was very pretty. But when I did the talk at Carl and Marion's with District, is it 4? They invited a Christmas collector dealer there who probably knows more than I'll ever remember. And he said, "No, it's glass." So here, I thought it was a dupe, but he said it is glass. And I saw him at the auction too.
Oh, it's
Now, so like every collector, everybody has a wish list.
I think it used to have a clapper.
Yes.
It's a whole other stuff.
Yes, probably it would have had a clapper. But you see the cap? It's probably Russian. So that thin wire with a bottle cap. Okay, so the miniature ones, where were the miniature ones? Let's see. Oh, here. So, let's compare it to just compare that to, maybe it is
That looks
Japanese.
more like a bottle tree. This
Yeah.
one's smooth.
Yeah. So I think that's Russian. Of course, this is Japanese. How are we doing, everyone?
This one's, oh, no, this goes.
Okay, we're good. So like any collector, you always have a wish list. So my wish list is your wish list now, okay? So when you're out there, if you're looking for any of the cardboard caps, but now I've told these two, so they're gonna find the cardboard cap before I am. So if you ever see at an antique store, when you see the unsilvered bulb with a cardboard cap on the top, buy it before they do.
What if it has a cardboard cap, but the ornament's not in good shape? Would you still want it?
Yes,
Yeah.
Wow.
for sure. And the shiny bright box. Terry, go home and look at your box. And they're not shiny bright.
No.
Remember, it's got Santa Claus shaking Uncle Sam's.
No, it's not that one.
Exactly. Now, everybody loves tree toppers.
Sorry, on
Yes.
the box, like, that's one box from one year? Like-
From the 1940 or 39 to 44.
They had the same box?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay. Woolworths sold it. It was green and it came in red also.
Huh.
And you'll see down on the bottom that picture. We'll find it after Santa Claus
Santa
shaking.
Claus.
Yeah.
Uncle
Doing the efforts for the wool. Now, I don't know if you collectors have got any toppers. I have 2 toppers.
Oh, I see.
I could not get this topper on here, and so it's underneath there. I would normally put that silver one up. And that is really collectible, very expensive. I've seen one collector have a whole mantle of toppers, and it was really stunning. And what I look for are receipt pics. So that's the old receipt pic, and then
I've been here and she's asked, and some people don't understand. what
so
she's
that's on
talking
my wish list. Receipt pics,
about. And then they're
that
kinda
box,
looking-
and the cardboard
So
top.
not even the topper, just the pick?
Yeah, just the pick. So then when I find more toppers, so I just have 2 toppers. I have a silver one underneath here that I would put up on this tree. Sorry, Carl.
No, that's covered, no, it's covered.
So this is from the 70s. And you can tell by the box, it's an original box. But still, it's collectible and it's still vintage. Where this one, do you see how it's painted?
Yeah.
It's hand painted on there. That would be much earlier. Probably the early 50s.
I didn't even know it was a jacket.
Okay, now, oh, sorry, yes.
So,
This one.
what year did the toppers?
How did this get back? Oh, yeah.
Exact same time in Germany, they were making toppers for their trees too. But they are really hard to find, of course, because lots of trees fell down, and what's gonna fall is the top of your tree first, right? Really hard to find, really super expensive. When I went to the auction, I thought, okay, maybe I'll treat myself and get a topper, because they had multiple toppers, but they were going for insane prices, like 100, 150, 120.
For top.
Yeah, yeah, very expensive.
So beautiful.